I've been enjoying discussion about food, but I'd like to broaden the discussion about local and broaden it. My question is to Michael. I speak to people about what about everything else that we need? Clothes, kitchenware, arts and crafts, but particularly clothes, say, that locally you go into the shops, nothing's in Australia, made in Australia any longer. So without bringing tariffs in again, which is not going to happen, I don't think, how do you envisage and see the possibility of us making all the other things that we need locally?
Right, okay, great question. And there's a lot of, I think, really interesting trends that we can look at that should give us optimism that probably 80 or 90% of what the industrialized North spends its money on can be cost effectively localized. First point to make, for households across the OECD countries, about 2/3 of the money that they spend is on services. Services used to be 1/3 of our expenditures back in 1960, now it's 2/3 of our expenditures. The thing about services is that they are inherently local. Now, I acknowledge that there is going to be the occasional surgery that occurs over the internet. Most of us want our surgeons local.
But not all of us have that choice.
Not all of us have that choice, that's right. But you know, when I got off the plane last Tuesday and I looked like a pretzel, I got a massage, all right? Now, I don't know how I'm going to get my massage over the internet. Some of you have some ideas, I'm sure. Then so let's talk about the other third, which is goods. When you look at the goods that we purchase, 3/4 of the goods we purchase are so-called non-durable goods, goods we consume regularly. So food falls in this category, paper. Clothing is kind of borderline durable, non-durable. I guess increasingly it's non-durable the way that it's manufactured. But the interesting thing about most non-durable goods is that they weigh a lot and their dollar value per unit weight is small. And what that means is that when oil prices rise, these are the first things we're going to be localizing. In fact, you can argue that this is one of the reasons why we're having food localization right now. It's not going to, yeah, we still may be importing wines from around the world and we still may be importing spices, but most foodstuffs, it's not going to be cost effective to import long distances unless we continue to subsidize oil and banking and transportation. And that's why the next time there's a GFC, and a bunch of big banks are ready to go out of business, we have to have the courage to accept the verdict of the marketplace that global is no longer cost effective.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. We're actually very close to the end of the session. I know it's sad, isn't it? It's been interesting. As a way of finishing, in my... That's easy for you to say. Okay, to curb my wrath, I'll ask Richard to ask a question. Oh, sorry, to whoever who was next. Sorry, thank you, Richard.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask you, how can we consider localization truly on the cultural side? How can we go back to a, say, around here, a Byron Shire-minded community, which we have, but we have because we have people coming from Bhutan. We have it because we have people, going all over the world to get ideas. How can we do it without returning to a sort of medieval, I'm scared of my neighbors, they live in Lismore type mentality? How can we do it while staying global? Because that is maybe arguably the greatest benefit of capitalism and global society, was that we were able to have people, to have friends in South Korea, to have people and ideas come from all over the world, and to eat things from all over the world. 95% of the things you found even at the farmers markets don't come from here. Zucchinis never existed in Australia. Look at the name, zucchini. It doesn't even make sense. It's one of the greatest things we have was to be global, and maybe the greatest benefit of capitalism was to bring that. How can we keep that global with being truly local without having to be, yes, I'll do my garden, but I'll take a flight to Spain next week?
Good question. Thank you. Thank you.
I actually think that's a difficult question to ask, and the answers are not going to be absolute. It's just an experiment, basically. But I think most people have the idea that localization means some kind of isolation, that it means a regionalism, that we're cut off from everyone else. I do not think that that's implied in going local. And you said something about how do we reclaim our culture? How do we reclaim culture, basically? How do we hold on to culture and at the same time connect with others who are different from us? Basically, when most people think of culture, they think of a frozen kind of practice. Like most people, when they think of Yoruba people, I don't know how many people know about Yoruba people in the house over here. But if anyone does, most people would think of our flamboyant dresses, the rituals that we practice, the colors we paint on our faces, the tribal marks we tell stories with. But those things in themselves are not what makes us Yoruba. It's the conversations we have. So a reclamation of culture is a reclamation of the conversational spaces that bind us together. That is, I think, at the heart of going local. And I do not think that it implies going back to some kind of medieval kind of era. Also, I think, am I doing good? Like I said, I'm not dealing with an exact science. Thank you. It's not an exact science to be able to answer such questions. It's really difficult to kind of even contain it in one's mind. The answer really is, the question rather is, how do we maintain both strands, global and local? And I believe on the local end, it means us coming together and concretizing practices that bind us together. It could mean a ritual. It could mean some kind of food network. It could mean anything, but it just means us interacting with each other. How do we maintain the global aspect as well? It also means that we have to open up spaces for learning and continuing to learn from other people. Now, how that is going to happen, I cannot tell, but I know that we cannot continue to see culture as a closed boundary. We see it as an open space for conversation with other people. Hope I did good.
Bio, can I
yes.
just come in quickly?
Yes.
One of the things in my life that I'm very happy that I did, as a young man, I went to Nicaragua in the immediate aftermath of the Nicaraguan Revolution, and I specifically went there not to carry a gun, I went there to pick coffee. And I picked coffee for 3 months in Nicaragua as part of an international solidarity effort, non-violent activism to help the economic basis of that new country. For many, many years, I would hunt down Nicaraguan coffee. Okay, I wanted to keep buying Nicaraguan coffee. It meant a lot to me personally and politically. What I want to, and I want to follow the young man's question, is that one of the things that concerns me about localization, does it mean, in practice, a diminution of solidarity? Is it better for me to be going out and buying Byron Bay coffee, which is also good coffee, or should I be hunting down that Honduran, El Salvadoran, Central American coffee because those people have a huge economic challenge?
Is it, you wanna, okay, is it better? That's a deep question. Is it better to want to engage in your immediate community, or is it better to want to
act in solidarity? Act
in solidarity with other spaces out there. I think that, difficult question, sorry. Okay, let Helena try. Sure. Let me muse on this. Let me chew this for a little while.
Okay.
I mean, from my point of view, it isn't such a difficult question because I'm looking at this economic globalization needing to shift towards economic localization. And as far as I'm concerned, that has absolutely nothing to do with isolation or a reduction in collaboration, international exchange, support, nothing. In fact, what I've experienced is that when people feel secure, and they need to feel secure in their identity as well as materially, you know, especially for men, it's incredibly important that they should be able to provide for their families and to feel that they're contributing in that way. And the current global market, which is marginalizing the 99%, is creating an absolutely clear and dramatic increase in violence, abuse of women, abuse of children, particularly from men who are feeling so frustrated because they're being robbed of their identity, robbed of their livelihood, and across the board one sees this increase. So we mustn't lose sight of this, that we're talking about this economic shift away from a few banks and corporations that are making it illegal for farmers to grow their own seeds, who want to patent them and push them on them and make sure that they put in a terminator gene so the seeds can't even be replicated. That is what we're talking about. That is a very, very clear need to transition. And in Costa Rica, what we were trying to say earlier is that when you have established this relationship, where in Costa Rica there is less money and more poverty, it's going across this global divide of currency speculation and manipulation. It's going to be very difficult for you to guarantee that your Nicaraguan coffee bought here hasn't gone through a system that's going to make them worse off. I mean, one of the ways that I've tried to lobby the fair trade movement is both with the ecological issues. They have not paid attention to the long transport miles, have only thought of how can we try to bring some money in there, and they haven't thought enough about the vagaries of the financial speculation and the change in value of currency and the glut in the market that has led to so many small producers only producing coffee, only producing cocoa, suddenly getting a tenth of what they were getting before. This is why we have a worldwide movement that is the biggest social movement in the world, called Via Campesina. Please remember that name. The biggest social movement in the world, Via Campesina. 200 million small farmers who are saying, please, 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 let us grow food for ourselves. They are for food sovereignty. And I want to thank Michael Croft, who's here in the audience. Put up your hand so people can see you, for helping to start a food sovereignty alliance in Australia.
Okay, thank you. Before you, let me just be traffic police person here. Is there a question on that side? Okay. Then you, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think it's been pretty much answered, but I was shocked because I've been involved in microcredit for about 6 years now, thinking I was doing the right thing and making changes in what I did over that time. And when Vandana said that yesterday, I was, oh my God, you know, I'd stopped ages ago putting money into people who were starting business in cities, because I was thinking, oh, I'll try to support people who are in the countryside, and I'll try to support people who are in the countryside who aren't using the money for fertiliser. And so I've been, I know, reducing the people who do send their stories to you, so you do feel you're having some sort of exchange with people. So I was thinking all along through this personal process, oh, thank goodness I finally hit on something where I feel quite happy about doing that. But I guess what I'm appreciating now, that maybe was making me feel better, but actually was not the way for me to put my Australian energy and my excess money, wasn't necessarily bringing about the desired result that I'm beginning to learn is what's necessary. So I just wanted to put that in there because I know a lot of my friends are also involved in that, and I'll have something to say to them when I go home.
If you could report back on their reactions, that would be great. Sir.
Yeah. My question is on the fear of impermanence, especially in the context of life and death. Is it with the globalized world we've started seeing dying as a bad thing and often associated a negative connotation with decay and death, which is essentially a part of ecology of the earth? So in a localized world, how we want to view dying and death and decay?
I'd like to take on that. Yes, thank you. I'm still going to answer that question.
No,
I'm chewing on it. Rich questions. Our frames of reference are different, but it's something to chew on. Yeah. Now, you said something about life and dying. I think one of the conditions for the system that we currently inhabit together is that there has been a demonization of death as a void, kind of, life itself. I think that's really concretized in how our medical facilities, medical services have been, set up, basically. It's about keeping life at all means, at all costs, no matter what. But, indigenous traditions would lead you and, bring you into a place where you start to see that, there's no mutual exclusivity between life and death. Life is part of death, and death is a natural part of life as well. So we die, we live. I think that's what the local brings into the situation. But the disenchantment of our modern context leads us to think that life is just one long straight line that ends up in a black void, and then that's it forever. I think we need to reclaim the story that says that, look, I die when I live, and even death is not the end of it all. Yes.
Another question.
Hi, a question for the panel. My question is that a lot of questions have been raised during the last 2 days about what can we do, what action can we take, what can we change. My question is, or before I say the question, what I've noticed is, in terms of what you said, Mick, about solidarity and localisation, I consider myself a global citizen. And I noticed living in the UK as an Australian, a lot of people say to me, the better life's over here. Why are you living in London? And I've worked with groups all over the world and done lots of work, as everyone has in this room. And to me, I'd like to ask the group your view on having people find their voices. We've found ours, you found yours, and having others find their voice, of women in the villages in India, Africa, wherever they are, to have their voice, to rise up, like we are talking about a choir. How can we have others speak out, find their voice, empower them as global citizens?
Is part of that they're listened to?
Well, firstly, political structures get in the way of them. In Panchayats in India, the women don't have a vote. They get a vote, but because they can't read and write, they don't know their rights. So there's political structures, there's cultural structures and all of that prevent them. But how can we stand in solidarity to find, in those local communities, help them find their voices, we find ours, and have all of the vessels raised as we go forward?
Thank you. Who'd like to answer that very hard question? Manish.
So, my experience, again, in just traveling and living with people and lots of wonderful, amazing women is a lot of them have their voices, we don't know their languages. And I think that's really, really fundamental thing, because I've seen it even in and I was talking to a friend, she has a company, and she was saying all these local indigenous people come and work in, and they're very timid and all that. And I said, what language do you speak into them in? And she's like, some English and some Hindi. I said, speak to them in Wagadi, their local language. You'll see totally different people all of a sudden coming out. Very, very, men and women, both, become timid in our language structures. The spaces, the political spaces we're creating are not the spaces of how people have organized themselves. The India Panchayat system is a total fraud. It has denied any kinds of local governance, leadership structures that existed before. It assumes that people didn't know how to manage their lives, their resources, their commons, and has removed all of that and linked them to this nationalized and corporatized party system, political party system, and said this is now the democracy that you must live and practice. So I think the fundamental, even this, again, some of the things we're unfolding is bringing in these structures, like democracy means this, and this is how you have to practice it, otherwise you are disempowered. I think some of these things we really have to come back and look at what are we talking about? That these people have been living for thousands of years. You didn't think they had any governance? And you're putting a system and saying, well, now we have to teach them, we have to empower them, we have to make them literate on how to govern their lives. They know much more than we do about those things. And so again, it's a question of how are we listening? Are we taking, people fly in and out, development consultants, are the ones who are doing this. And they have never bothered to really learn the language, to know what people are going. When I used to work in international development, it was insane how many cut and paste reports. Once in a while, a consultant would forget to, in their thing, forget to change Bhutan into, Nigeria, and you're just like, where does this come from? So I think there's something much deeper which I would love to explore with you, that we really need to ask about what are the stories we're carrying about the other, and what we think they are. It's really. For me, the whole narrative has been around, that we're still continuing, is around dehumanizing people from the global south and people from all human beings, actually. The system is doing that to us all in various ways. So.
I would like to go back to money and sort of say that for me it's like it's our new God. And we give it some intrinsic value, and we actually compare things and say, oh, these people are poor, they live on $1 a day. I was a teacher in Poland, and I earned $12 per month. I could afford to go out, I had a unit, I could pay